Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sorry about the little bit of delay. Ann, if you can let the record show that all 7 commissioners are present. And correspondence, I don't know that we have any.
Not related to the agenda item today.
All right, great, thank you. And there will not be any minutes on this today's agenda. They're still under preparation, and so we'll move right into the city manager's report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one street aid expenditure dated 7/18/2019. Vendor is Delmarva Power in the amount of $8,991.97 for streetlights.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve street aid expenditures of $8,991.97. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
On the citizen self-service portal, which has been up and running for many months now, we have added building permits and real estate information. The city recently introduced these new features on the self-service portal. It allows the public to search for business licenses, building permits, and also real estate information. At this time, the database will only show applications and permits that were submitted after March of this year, and it is on the website. The service is free to all residential and commercial customers, and it is available 24 hours, 7 days a week.
That sounds excellent. Do the building permits extend to demolition permits and pre-permits and
All building permits should be on there,
all
including
permits?
those,
Very
yes.
good, thank you. Excellent.
And that, just informationally, all of that information is on the agenda tonight, or today.
Correct. Just repeating the local comprehensive development plan. That's a tool that is used by the city, which is a state-mandated principal document outlining the city's policies and goals regarding future growth and management of all resources. Citizen input is vital in shaping the future of our city. That's why we do it periodically, and 3 separate survey options, community, business, and visitor, have been provided to gain public input. The survey period is now open, closes on August 30th. Preliminary numbers are encouraging, showing a wide range of participation, especially amongst the visitors to the city. And on that note, for the comprehensive development plan, tomorrow, Saturday, CDP is hosting a workshop at 9 a.m. here in the Commissioners' meeting room. The subject will be sea level rise and related environmental and economic impacts. Tony Pratt is a consultant specializing in marine erosion and sediment deposition issues. He'll be talking about sea level rise, coastal community resilience, and he will help facilitate the discussion. There'll be a second workshop on another topic of mixed-use housing in commercial districts, and that, again, is hosted by the Planning Commission on Saturday, August 3rd, 9 a.m. again, here in the Commissioners' meeting room. The 2020 census page is now live on the city website under For Residents, along with frequently asked questions, and this content will be updated periodically. Work continues through August 28th with nighttime temporary lane closures for the Rehoboth Drawbridge. DelDOT's contractor is sandblasting and painting the underside of the drawbridge. And of course, we know and residents can anticipate noise during this portion of the work. There's a single nighttime lane closure from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Flaggers are on site to direct motorists. There is original lighting at the immediate site of the work, but the contractor this week has also installed additional lighting where the lanes shift and crosses the bike path. Chief Banks was suggesting that to the contractor, and they have installed that. The bid has been advertised for the Delaware Avenue Stormwater Pipe Rehab. This, again, is the lining of the pipe under the boardwalk between Wilmington and Brooklyn and lining the pipe on Delaware from the boardwalk to First Street. That bid has been advertised, and a pre-bid meeting is scheduled for next week, July 24, with the bid opening in mid-August. The 2019 street paving plan has been developed with the Director of Public Works and the city's contracted engineers, and we will present that to the commissioners at your August 5th workshop. A new stop sign has been installed at Henlopen Avenue and Grove Street. The sign was added to provide safety for this intersection. It's on a busy route. An update on the Youth Conservation Corps. They've been in the city 3 times since starting on June 27th. So far, they've completed a boardwalk cleanup, and they've removed invasive species from Central Park and the median along Park Avenue. City staff has been providing them with the required educational components that have included a history on the city's boardwalk, the importance of beach nourishment, an exercise on invasive species, information on forest restoration, and information on the city's designation as a Tree City, USA. The group will continue to focus on conservation projects in the city of Rehoboth Beach, and they're scheduled to do their work and continue every Thursday until mid-August. And just an update on the 2 interns, which we have working through the middle of August. These are paid interns, graduate students from the University of Delaware. Simone Atkins has been busy working on a variety of different projects, benefit the residents and also visitors. One project has been ADA accessible parking spaces in the city, specifically within the commercial district. Simone has completed an inventory of these spaces on Rehoboth Avenue and will also be inventorying the spaces along Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue. In addition to this, she's been researching accessibility guidelines provided by the Delaware Department of Transportation and creating a parking story map. The research will help the city identify where additional spaces are needed and how many, along with the ADA Accessibility Project. Simone has also been preparing the educational moments for the Youth Conservation Corps that I just mentioned, assisting with the city's preparation for the 2020 census, and assisting with the Stormwater Improvement Project with GHD. Our second intern, Jason Wardrop, is underway reviewing and updating information for the Delaware EPCA reporting program, Tier 2 Emergency and Hazardous Chemical Inventory. The reporting program is situated within the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, Emergency Prevention and Response Branch. And the program is responsible for the collection, management, and dissemination of information reported under the Federal Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act. That's EPCA, Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, as well as the Delaware law, which builds upon the federal requirements. Jason is also reviewing other municipalities' public way permitting processes for recommendations for city code updates, along with researching public inconvenience fees. The study looks at the code and fees from other municipalities that utilize fees for public inconveniences when streets, sidewalks, or other public ways are obstructed temporarily during activities such as construction. Wanted to just give you an update on parking meter revenue through yesterday, July 18th. We do have what I can say is that we're on target. We have a variance of approximately $379,000 less than what we took in last July through the month of July. So with 13 days remaining in the month of July, I'm pretty confident that we'll make up this $379,000. And the ACT group, the Association of Coastal Towns, which is a group that rebanded about 1.5 years ago. The mayor and I and some staff have been attending those meetings. We just paid annual dues the second annual dues program of $4,000 for this. And we're actually, the mayor and the 7 mayors of the coastal towns, but the 7 managers are in the process of looking at the goals of that group and trying to retool it, which would make it most advantageous for the coastal towns in the future. That's my report, Mayor.
Okay,
I just have a couple.
question. Go ahead. You first.
Just real quick, Sharon, what makes you confident that we'll make up that 379K? That seems like a lot for July. Is that just based on your experience, or like what gives you the confidence that we'll recoup that or get back on track again?
Well, with 13 days and looking at the month of June, which was well above the revenue received last year, well, I say that, obviously, we need nice weather, and the $1 additional hourly fee that was added to Rehoboth, Wilmington, and Baltimore, that has clearly shown that we're increasing in revenue rates. So I do feel confident that within 13 days, we'll make up that difference.
Sounds like we were above our projections in June.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
I
Thank you.
looked at it
Thank you.
through June
That's helpful.
30th. Through June 30th this year versus last year, we were up 35%, about $250,000. And just the way the system works is it's, as you look at the numbers through June this year, we have X dollars, and it looks at the numbers through June last year. It doesn't go day by day. It goes like month by month. So at the end of the month, we'll have specific numbers
Okay,
that are
that's
more in line,
helpful.
I think.
I'm sorry, one other question, just real quick. How many of those speed bumps, what are they called, the soft speed bumps, whatever, how many actually were installed, and where were they installed? I've seen the one on Columbia. It looks nice. It's right by my street, so I see people actually slowing down. It seems effective. How
Yeah.
many more have been implemented, and how many more will be implemented?
There are none right now that are planned for.
Okay. Is it just the one that was
Yes,
installed?
we just had the one on that length of, cross length of
Yeah.
Columbia.
Have you gotten any feedback on it, pro or con? I mean, I've just watched the traffic slow down, so I guess that's the point. Right?
Do you have anything to add, Chief?
Turn it on.
I know we've gotten good feedback on it.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
the police department, along with the city, has received several emails positive. I haven't seen anything negative. Said it's actually working, slowing down, and had several other requests. Another one on Columbia had today, I think, Hickman Street and others. So people are seeing it, and they're actually requesting for more.
Interesting.
But yeah, so positive feedback. Haven't seen anything negative yet.
Okay, great.
Chief, of the requests, are they asking for it to be put in front of their houses or close to it, or far enough down the street where it dampens the speed by the time it gets to them? That's a
little
serious
bit of
question.
both.
I mean,
A little bit of both. Like the one on Columbia Avenue, where the speed cushion went in, the individual that was requesting it would actually liked it right in front of his house, but it was on top of an intersection. So in that category, I had to move down, but I did reach out to the homeowner that it was going in front of. And all the other ones, I'd have to actually look at the emails and specifically see their address that they're emailing from and where they're saying. A lot of times it's a generic, hey, I see that's working. You ought to think about putting one on this street. So they're not necessarily advocating in front of their house or not, one way or the other, but I'd have to individually look at each email.
I had a constituent say that he saw that, he liked it, he wants one. And I told him he needs to go spend a few hours sitting next to it and listening to cars go over it, because they do make a little noise. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, excuse me, what kind of evidence or data is necessary for you to recommend to the city that speed bumps would go in additional locations?
That's kind of a difficult question, and I'll try to sum it up. First of all, you want to look at crash data and look and a lot of speed data. The reality is the data that we have with speed isn't going to constitute necessarily a speed cushion or a speed bump or things like that. But DelDOT is that Columbia had to be a DelDOT street. As far as the recommendation, it's really going to come down to on city streets. the will of the mayor, commissioners and the police department together and say if you want one on or not, because you don't want them everywhere, because fire, you have city vehicles have to remove snow and things like that with snow blades, and all that is a hazard that comes. So you want to be really thinking about this before you do, along with for the fire company, public safety. But those are things you're going to look at is the crash data, the speed, and again, is there truly a problem or not? And is there another way to slow it down? The one on Columbia Avenue, it was years looking at, working with DelDOT, working with this commission, mayor, city manager, and trying to figure out what we can do. And finally, the DelDOT wouldn't do anything necessarily because it didn't meet their specs as far as speeding or accident criteria, but they were willing to let us move forward. So that's how that came about.
Thank you.
It just on the same lines, I got an email the other day from somebody that liked the one on Columbia, and they wanted one down by their house because their thoughts are 1 in 10 people go the speed limit. But if you look at the data that the chief has put together over the last couple of years, whether it's on Henlopen or Columbia or wherever those radar screens are that we have on some of those streets, it's around, I think it's 5% or less are going over the speed limit. You know, it seems like the only cars that are going over the speed limit are the ones you see. And, you know, if you stood there all day long, it's, you know, 1 out of 100 is going over the speed limit, or 5 out of 100 are going over the speed limit.
We do have the statistic data collector out there now on Columbia Avenue again to see what impact. So we're going to try to look at the numbers and see how that goes. We are posting that on our city website on the police side with the traffic when we do that. Usually it's a week or two behind, but as we get the data, we post that on there. So thank you.
Good. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got one more thing. Yeah, Sharon mentioned ADA research by the intern, and I think most of you know that ADA accessibility, especially to the beach, is something dear to my heart. And I would implore you all, as a commission and the city manager and the administration, to seek out restoration of the handicap crossings at Laurel and Maryland, and to restore the on the beach along the toe of the dune access Moby mats for people to sit on them. That's something that has gained a lot of popularity, and I just about have tears in my eyes when I walk by there today and see that there's no place for the disabled to sit down there. So I'm hoping that there's a commitment that in the future it's restored next year after the renourishment, and that we find a way to maintain it. Therefore, even if DENREC doesn't come out and do that. Thank you.
City Solicitor.
Gary Glass, 105 Country Club Drive. The citizen self-service portal, does that include, I've gotten even this week requests for rental license. Does it include rental license on the self-service portal where somebody can look up and see if a house has a rental license?
Correct. Yes.
It does?
Rental license is part of the business licenses, so they are there.
Thank you.
Walter Birmingham, 123 Henlopen Avenue. I'd like to thank you for your assistance on getting the farmers market side access opened up. It was much better this last week. The bike rack still has not been restored. It's stored back behind the bathrooms. Plus that you have on the marquee, the parking in the convention hall lot. It's very, very conspicuous. I don't know how long it's been there. I noticed it today. The stop sign at Grove and where?
And open.
And on which corner?
On the northeast corner.
So it's in front of, so that people coming out of Henlopen Acres don't have to stop,
No, so it's a three-way stop, no longer.
stopping on all corners. Okay, thank you. The pipelining project, will it be allowed to be done in the summer? Boardwalk ends.
The work is, they're scoping out the work now.
I would,
Not going to be, it's not quite going to be done this summer.
The outfall project got an add-on with 300,000 plus for stoning on Henlopen Avenue on both sides, whether we liked it or not. What's happened to so that in case the rest of you don't know, day before yesterday, 67 and 65 Henlopen Avenue, all the stone was removed from in front of those two residences, taken down to base and built back up by the city crews at, I would think, great expense. Many truckloads of stone and everything were removed. Many truckloads were brought in. Previously at 136, Peninsula Paving came in and did that at the city's expense, and it's either 120 or 122 Henlopen. That's also been pulled out. Why are we replacing the stone that was put in per the engineer's specifications? Because the people are supposedly saying it's not draining. And how much more is it going to be done? Because if you paid 300,000 minimum plus.
Walter, that was not really part of the city manager's report. If you have questions about,
We can ask, because the rest of you don't know about this.
if you want to ask, you can direct
Just
that
did.
to the city manager, not in a meeting
How do
here.
the rest of the commissioners know? Do any of the rest of you know that probably thousands and thousands of dollars has been spent here? And why? How many more places are going to be done? We heard nothing in your report about it. You could tell us and then we would know. But otherwise, I don't think it's unrealistic to know that.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
City Solicitor, please.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to let everybody know, and this is not a big deal, but as you know, the beach walk litigation continues to proceed. Today, we had an answer to the complaint due, which Commissioner Mills and I both got a chance to review it. Max Walton, your outside counsel, filed that, so that's continuing to trickle along. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I sent you all an email on this, is we received an application for a rezoning at the property located at the corner of State and Rehoboth. It's 330 Rehoboth Avenue. That property is split zoned right now between a residential district and a commercial district. But we got that request in early June. Ann and I shared some emails about what direction it should take. Typically what happens is that type of an application would come to the commissioners. The commissioners would make a referral to the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on what you all should eventually do with that application, either approve it or deny it. Ann and I somehow inadvertently, we didn't get it on your schedule. And so what we're requesting is that you allow us, in the interest of moving this application along, to make an administrative referral to the Planning Commission. Again, this has not been your typical policy, and we don't expect to change the policy. We expect all of these applications to come to you, but this one just kind of fell through the cracks, and we'd like to so unless somebody objects up here, our intention is to send it down to the Planning Commission administratively and allow them to make a recommendation back to you, and it'll come on your docket at some point.
I'm neither here nor there. I mean, I'm more against it because I'm a stickler for procedure. However, I don't want to hold it up, and yet I hope that this is not a standard practice and becomes a precedent in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that comment. It does not. There's no intention for it to become a standard practice, and it won't. That's all I had, Mayor.
Okay, great, thank you. We're going to move right into reports, going right down the committee. Anything from Animal Issues Day?
No report.
All right, Bandstand Committee.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick report here for those of you that aren't familiar with the Bandstand Committee. Our mission is to, recommend rates to the full Board of Commissioners for the bandstand for the convention center, and look at kind of policy and other things associated with the bandstand convention center and special events such as weddings. At our last meeting, we identified two areas that we are going to focus on over the upcoming months. First of all, the Chamber of Commerce asked us to look at potentially establishing or recommending the establishment of hourly rates for the use of the convention center especially during the week. The convention center is pretty well booked up on the weekends. But it is available a lot of weekdays, and some businesses have expressed interest in going in and renting the convention center for a couple-hour meeting or other activities. So that's one thing we're going to be looking at and soliciting input on from various stakeholders. The second thing that the group's going to be focusing on is what should we be focusing on relative to the future direction of the convention center? As everybody knows, when the new municipal complex was built, we didn't invest a lot in improvements in the convention center. There's a really great front entrance. There's a new floor. We did some painting, but we didn't invest in things like new chairs and new seating and lighting and audiovisual and those sorts of things. And we've gotten some feedback that might be something we want to look at because it is a popular venue. It's one of the only convention centers in this particular part of Sussex County. So we have a small group that's working with the Chamber of Commerce and again also doing outreach to other stakeholders to determine and some areas where we might want to make improvements to the convention center or not. But anyway, we're looking at what we want to do in the very near term with the convention center going forward. So if anybody's interested in that, our next meeting is going to be in September, and we do have the group, a couple of the members of our committee reaching out again to various stakeholders to get some feedback on where we should go next and what we should do with the convention center to keep it a viable and growing asset for the city of Rehoboth Beach. So I just wanted to update everybody on that. And if you're interested, come to the meeting. Or if you want to talk to the folks that are doing the research on either of these topics, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve's part of the committee. And Steve, did you want to add anything?
No, you've
Apologize.
covered everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Boardwalk and Beach, anything?
No, we're on summer hiatus right now.
All right. Law Oversight Committee, Mr. Hoyt Decker. And again, in your packet is a report from that committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hoyt Decker.
No?
Hoyt Decker with the Law Oversight Committee. I sent you a several-page memo talking about the status of the committee's look at the tree ordinance, and I gathered that there are some questions, so I'm here to entertain those questions. No questions?
Well, I'll start off, I
Okay.
guess. In your memorandum of July 19th, what you have at the bottom, attachments 1 through 5. And I'm looking at attachments 1 through 5. They don't have the authors written on there, and it seems that some of these are by different authors.
They
Is
are.
that true?
They
For
are.
instance, attachment 1, I think, is Sturgis Dodge, and I couldn't identify attachment 2, 3, 4, or 5.
I can provide you with that information. We actually, I don't know if I've referenced this in the memo, but in October of 2018, we made assignments. And so that's reflected in the minutes for that month's meeting, that October Law Oversight Committee meeting for October. And don't test me on who did what, because I'm not going to be able to answer that question. But I'm happy to send you that information.
The other thing is that these are not in our formatting policy, so that would be helpful, especially because it doesn't have the draft watermark on them, so that we can understand these are not final documents, I assume, right? Okay, gotcha.
Well, excuse me, let me respond. I have been enlightened on that. My guru took care of that about a week ago. I just drafted an agenda which I sent out to the members yesterday, and it contains an element for discussion of formatting policy. So I hope to have us get into that mode shortly.
The other thing is, I had a hard time reading some of the attachments in this respect, trying to identify what's new and what's old. I recognize that use of a red line version might help us, but it all depends to what extent you go and change the original document. If you get to do too much, the red line gets to be troublesome. There is a convention in red line, at least on the newer red line versions, where if you cut something out and you paste it in a new location somewhere, on my computer, it shows up in green. So deletions are red strike through, blue is new additions, and green is transferring from one. So I don't know if there's a convention like using green wording or something would help to identify what is in this document is from the original, and what is, and then therefore, if it's not green, the rest is new. That's generally my comments.
Okay. So you need to understand, and I guess everybody that's looked at these documents, and I recognize it's pretty confusing, and I'm the first to admit that. And that's the reason for that is because I haven't a clue about redlining. I mean, I just acquired the word processing application about 2 months ago, and I'm struggling, and it's probably easy to see when you look at the documents at this point. And I think there's something else I need to say to you, because there are several iterations of the tree ordinance, or at least obviously we have an original document, we have the current provision. We also have a study that was done in 2014 by the Planning Commission. And we've had subsequent, one member of the Planning Commission actually went beyond the 2014 and provided a further iteration of the document. And so I have come to a conclusion that if we attempt to do that, even if you're an expert on redlining, I think you're going to really have problems with it. So I think my plan, and I'm open to suggestions, is to create a document going forward that represents starting as a starting point, the now current provisions, and use a red line basis to provide the suggested revisions that would be made to that.
Well,
So-
I think that's reasonable, because I think it's a very, very difficult task to be referencing back to the original and then referencing back to the Planning Commission report. And so I think, for me, the Planning Commission report would need to be separate, and I would just have to read it side by side, I think. But again, I think what would help in reading these things is to be able to understand where your comments come from relative to the current.
And you need to understand, it is a process that takes place during the meetings. We are very much focused on the excellent work that was done by the Planning Commission and subsequent suggestions that were made. And that takes place during our meeting. I mean, we hash all these things out. We're getting to a point now, as I've referenced in the memo, we're down to the hard stuff. There's about 3 or 4 provisions that are probably going to take us a couple, 3 meetings to get through. But then I'm hoping to go back and have what ultimately will be a final draft document, red line, which we'll send to you guys.
And that'll be a red line from the original one,
Correct.
Okay, okay.
based upon your input as well as maybe the Planning Commission's input in 14 and 16.
As I said, as we have been going along, we've been taking all that into consideration in our deliberations.
Thank you.
And Hoyt, what's your, I know you're 30 done and 12 to go, as you told us in the memo.
Right.
What's your time estimate for what you were
I-
just
you
telling us?
Sir, I did a report to you guys back in March, and I told Commissioner Calusi, July, we'll have it for you in July. Well, I
year?
think
What
it's
year?
July. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the question that I have that I present to you is, we want to get it done, yes, but we want to get it done right. I mean, and if it's going to take us a little longer, I think that's appropriate,
Well,
with respect.
yeah, and I look at it now, and it was originally done in 2006. So it's taken 13 years to get to where we are now, so what's a couple more months? I mean, I'm not saying take a lot more time, but I'm just saying,
Well,
it is, you know, people have been talking about doing something with it for the last 10 years, and, you know, the fact that you guys are doing an awful lot of work and taking the time and effort to do this, I mean, I don't have a problem waiting a few more months, but, you know, as long as it's done right, and I think it's being done right.
okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Hoyt.
I just want to, Hoyt, thank you. Hoyt, I want to thank you and your committee for taking this on. This is not definitely easy. There's a lot here. There's a lot of conflicting data. And, you know, it's, we obviously all want to make these changes. So I know that's the little bit of pressure that, that you're feeling, the time pressure.
So,
But thank you for taking this
I
on.
appreciate your comments. And you just
honestly.
wedged the door open just a little crack to give me an opportunity to offer a thought on a different subject, and that's the zoning code. And I've said this will be my fourth statement in a public meeting. You have budget meetings coming up here in the fall, and I would strongly recommend you consider some discussion about getting professional help to look at the zoning code. Because I don't want that pressure.
Consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Hoyt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hoyt.
We're going to move right down, I don't see any liaison reports, to number 13, which is a public hearing on the consideration of a proposed ordinance to amend Section 270-69 of the city's zoning code relating to the conversion of violations of Article 7 signs from criminal to civil offenses. Mr.
Right,
Solicitor?
so this one you've had described previously by Mr. Jenny and myself. That, as you recall, not too long ago, you converted several of the city's provisions from criminal offenses to civil offenses. This is one that Mr. Jenny recommended. It happens to be in the zoning code, and because it's in the zoning code, it requires a public hearing. So this would convert violations of the sign portion of the zoning code. So only those items that relate to signs within the zoning code. And a violation of those provisions would become a civil offense rather than a criminal offense if you were to adopt the ordinance that's before you. And today's, the purpose of today is to have a public hearing to take comment from the public and possibly render a decision.
Do we need to read, we don't need to read the resolution because we already did that.
You already
right?
adopted, that's right there. You already adopted the resolution, it's just down to the ordinance now.
Do we need to read over the ordinance itself,
Let me-
the changes?
Thanks for mentioning that. Let me mention the ordinance by title and describe what changes. So the title of the ordinance is an ordinance to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the municipal code of the city of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 2001, Section 270-69, relating to the conversion of violations of Article 7 signs from criminal to civil offenses. So what would happen is in Section 270-69A, it currently says, violations of the provisions of this article shall constitute a misdemeanor punishable by a fine of not less than $25, not to exceed $250 per offense, plus court costs, whenever such persons shall have been notified by the building inspector or by service of a summons in a prosecution or in any other way that they are committing such violation of this chapter. Each day that they shall continue shall constitute a separate offense punishable by like fine or imprisonment. It would change that language to violations of the provisions of this article shall be a civil offense pursuant to Chapter 126 of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach. Any person who violates this article shall pay a civil assessment of $100. Each day that a violation continues after due notice has been served shall be deemed a separate offense. Thank you for that.
And that is the only change.
It is.
Any comments, questions?
I'd make a motion that
We
we,
need to open up public hearing.
oh, this is a public hearing.
Yeah,
I thought
sorry
this was
about
a
that.
resolution. Okay.
No, the resolution was for the public hearing last time around. We're in it.
Got it.
Any comments from the commissioners?
No.
If not, we can open up
Well,
to, oh, go ahead.
I was going to wait till after a motion made, but, you know, I support this. Yeah, we've got a pretty good building and licensing group, I believe, and they're not going to go out there and violate everybody, or I don't think past practice is that they go out and violate everybody the first time they try to work with them. So this is more for the repeat offender, if you will, or the hard to get understand business owner. So I'm fine with it. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes Dennis's job as the code enforcer a little bit easier, and I think that's what we want to make sure we do, as well as uphold the code as they are.
And the only thing I'd want to add is I know that Dennis coordinated with Chief Banks and his staff, and they were agreeable, thought this was a good move for the city, so.
Any other comments,
I have
Commissioners?
nothing, just support for this.
Okay. Anybody in the public would like to comment? Please.
So again, Hoyt Decker, and I'm here representing the Law Oversight Committee. And maybe I should have said this a moment ago, but as part of the report I gave you the other day, I commented on the action that you're considering at this moment. The Law Oversight Committee, Gene Lawson specifically, took a look at this issue, and he actually proposed a revision which is quite similar to the one that's before you right at the moment. And we addressed the issue at our July meeting and decided that we weren't going to make any comments beyond what is now being considered. So we're supporting what your action is. I will note that there is a second provision in the zoning code that is it's a broader penalties, violations and penalties provision that deals with issues other than signs. And it's at the moment, it's a tentative item for our agenda for our next meeting, but we might be bringing that up for discussion and possibly drafting a recommendation to you that would come at some time in the near future. So,
Great, thank you. Anybody else? If not, I'll close off the public hearing, and if there's no more discussion from the commissioners, if I can get a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 2001, Section 270-69, relating to the conversion of violations of Article 7 signs from criminal to civil offenses. Is there any further discussion?
And on this, Mayor, could you take I know it's a little bit weird in this context, but it's a zoning one, so.
Yeah, and for that reason, because it is a zoning situation, I'm going to take it commissioner by commissioner. Commissioner Byrne?
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp?
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser?
Aye.
Commissioner Mills?
Aye.
Commissioner Calusi?
Aye.
Commissioner Schiffer?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. We'll thank Dennis later. Great. Okay, we're going to move right into old business. And we're going to further discussion and possible vote on no smoking areas amendment to Chapter 224. We had discussed this, I think, last month or 2 months ago about, extending the no smoking areas in the city. And I will turn it over to the city, or I'll turn it to Dick Byrne if you want to say something, and then to the solicitor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It is something that we discussed a couple of months ago. When I was 100% citizen sitting out there, I brought it up a couple of times over the last few years, just a concern that we have some public areas that were not included in the original ordinance banning smoking in public areas. And it's become very clear to me, particularly along the Canal Park areas, that there's quite a bit of smoking, and that the remnants, the smoking butts, the cigarette butts, all end up on the ground and get either washed into with the stormwater into our stormwater system, and then end up in the canal, or they get washed or blown down the bank into the canal. And so environmentally, that's a significant problem for us, and it's one that I think that we can deal successfully with by extending the smoking ban. And then since the new municipal complex has been built, which includes the parking building and so on, it's important that we also include that. And so that's what I've worked on as I've gone around town and even asked people and observed. No one seems to be against this. I can add that I've also taken a look at what other communities our size have done across the country in recent years. Some have gone much further than we're going with this. There's a number of communities that have totally banned smoking in all public areas, meaning all sidewalks, all streets, all areas. We're certainly not at that point yet, but I think this makes sense because these are park areas where there's park benches, there's picnic tables, there's families, and it's so it's not only a health hazard to others because of secondary smoke, it's also an environmental hazard. So with that, I turn it over to the solicitor to.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to just identify the areas that are being added under the ordinance so that the ordinance would include these additional areas. And to be clear, none of the areas that currently are in the ordinance as prohibited areas are being deleted. So all the areas that are in there stay. The additional ones are the Grove Park Canal access area on the west side of the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal. There's also an addition of the entirety of the municipal campus, this campus that we're on now, defined for purposes of this chapter as the area that includes the City Hall Convention Center, parking department and communications buildings, and the surrounding grounds, including steps, sidewalks, parking lots, garden and grassed areas, and including the pedestrian area known as Steve Elkins Way from Baltimore Avenue to the City Hall parking lot. Such grounds generally defined by vehicular and pedestrian entrances at City Hall Drive, 3rd Street, Baltimore Avenue, the west side of the fire department building, and 2 entries off Rehoboth Avenue, one on the east side and one on the west side of the City Hall building. Sorry, hall is spelled how, it's a correction that needs to be made. I don't know of how, but hall. West side City Hall building, except smoking shall be permitted on the municipal campus in designated and marked locations as determined by the city manager. Those 2 locations are in your packet. There's photographs of those, and maybe the city manager will mention them when I'm done. And then also the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal park area on the south side of Rehoboth Avenue between the canal and Canal Street. There's an additional change being made to the ordinance under the violations and penalties section, which is 224-4. There were some provisions inserted when the smoking prohibition laws were initially enacted. Those laws required that there be a warning given in certain instances, but there could be a citation if it was a second offense within a 4-month period. The chief and I have spoken, and I think he's mentioned it probably here once or twice before, that those provisions are kind of unmanageable by the officers. They're difficult to enforce in practical experience. So those 2 provisions, section 224-4, A and B, are being deleted. So 224-4 would simply read, any violation of this chapter is declared a civil offense pursuant to Chapter 126 of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach. And those are the changes. So the two areas, by the way, that are have been identified by the city manager at this point for designation as smoking allowable areas are, as you come out of the main entrance to the convention center, there'll be one to the left right around the corner. That's the first picture in your packet. And then one to the right a little bit further down the sidewalk heading toward Rehoboth Avenue.
Can I point out one thing on 224-2A, where you say Grove Park, including the Grove Park Canal access on the west side of the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal? I think that should be east side.
Grove Park, including the Grove Park Canal access
Line
area.
28.
Yeah,
128.
on the west side of Lewis. Yeah, I think they should
Correct.
be east, right?
Because
Right,
it
Commissioner?
should be east.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, if you can make that adjustment.
yeah.
Okay. Is that,
We probably can't regulate the other side.
yeah, at the moment,
Right, right,
never know.
right. So that's the ordinance for you.
You ready for comments?
Yeah,
I'd like to, Ann, I'd like that document camera, please. I wanted to make some comments on this as presented. I can't support some of it right now, however, and I want to articulate why. I have been a fan of no smoking ordinance in the town. If you recall, Commissioner Clusie and I co-sponsored the first no smoking ordinance in Rehoboth, and then when Commissioner Clusie was no longer on the board, I sponsored expansion of the no smoking areas to the beach, boardwalk, et cetera. So I am a big fan of providing no smoking areas. I'm not against smoking. What I am against is people having to walk through other people's cigarette smokes. And that's why I believe banning smoking from certain areas is worthwhile and good for the public health, as well as allowing people that want to smoke or need to smoke their designated areas, as we have done on the beach. The first thing I wanted to show you is remind you that you enlarge that in. This is a brochure that we did when we first brought up the no smoking areas. You might recall, or if you don't recall, when we first did the no smoking areas, we did a big education package so that everybody knew what was going on and what. And these brochures were created at that time of the second expansion of the no smoking areas. And these brochures were put into realtor bags, and we did all kinds of media education so that people ahead of time knew what they were getting into. And it wasn't necessarily a surprise to the majority of them. What I did want to show you, if you could squeeze in as tight as you can to this one here. Can you go any bigger, Ann? There we go. What I wanted to show you here is that on lines 28, 29, 30, 31, where the current language says smoking is prohibited in Grove Park, including all of the area of the city situated generally between Rehoboth Avenue, Columbia Avenue, Grove Street, and the Lewis-Rehoboth Canal, excluding the parking lot. That's this area right here, which includes the east side of the canal access part. You don't need it in that ordinance. However, I'll defer to Commissioner Byrne and the city manager and Chief Banks that if they needed to be in there for clarity, then you can put it in there. But otherwise, it's already covered. And our signs are already up there to tell people that they cannot smoke. So I would suggest that maybe that's just left alone. One of the other things in here has to do with designated smoking areas. And here in lines 92, 93, 94, it mentions no smoking basically in the entirety of the municipal campus, except smoking shall be permitted on the municipal campus in designated and marked locations as determined by the city manager. I'm a big fan. I don't mind the city manager determining where they can go. However, as we did for the beach designated no smoking areas, we gave parameters first. And then the city manager had latitude within those. And I would suggest that we, again, have some conditions put on there. For instance, in the smoking areas, designated smoking areas on the beach, it says each area where smoking is permitted shall be marked by appropriate signage and shall be provided with a cigarette or cigar butt disposal container. And secondly, besides the other conditions, no area where smoking is permitted shall be located any nearer than 40 feet from any entranceway or path to the beach. I would suggest we do the same thing for this ordinance, designate that the designated smoking areas have to be X number of feet away from the entrances. State law, I believe, Delaware state law, I believe, requires, I'm trying to recall, 25-foot minimum. I don't remember, but they have a minimum distance for smoking area. And obviously, there's a reason for that. The rationale is that people should not have to walk anywhere near or through a designated smoking area to access where they're going. So that brings me to these two areas. If you could zoom out, please, Ann. These are the two areas where these are two areas that apparently Sharon picked out for smoking areas. This one is what, right at the rotunda, right here, I believe, in the front of the building, where people walk up the sidewalk along the road down here to get to the back entry to the convention hall, and they're walking by a potential.
Oh, that's at the
Smoking.
entrance of the convention center.
So this is to the right.
Of the
Okay.
entrance of the convention
Okay,
center.
I don't
not
have
the
it right,
rotunda.
but to me, my methodology and philosophy is correct. We still have people walking by smoking areas to access the convention hall. And the same thing here. In this area, this entrance here is what, the same as this entrance
Yes.
here. So we've got the one no smoking area here, which is this picture. And then on the other side of the convention hall entry, we've got, but people are walking by there. When I participated in the City Hall project, and one of the things that we talked about at that time was providing an area for future designated smoking area in the back grass area where the breaker starts, going out of this area toward Bad Hair Day. So essentially diagonally opposite Bad Hair Day, which is where everybody goes and smokes today from over Bad Hair Day in that area. So that area is big enough to even put a pavilion because one of my suggestions is that we should have pavilions or provide for pavilions at some point in any designated smoking area on the municipal campus to take care of those smokers that want to smoke out in the rain. I'm not here to punish them, but I do want them in a designated area far enough away from the primary walking areas. So I and then besides that area, there's some areas over here that are away from the sidewalks, kind of near, close-ish to the police area. That could be designated. So that's my recommendation, one on each side to accommodate smokers and to accommodate them in the rain. Now, I'd like to share with you a note I sent to Commissioner Byrne that I wanted to give you advance notice of my line of thinking, Dick, before we go forward with this. Where are the new no smoking areas? Well, they're proposed, but I disagree with them. Are there any designated smoking areas associated with these areas? Well, the only ones I've got are on the city municipal campus. We're not doing any designated up in Grove Park or on the south side there. Okay, I understand that. What is the cost to implement new no smoking measures based on different criteria? The cost. I'd like to know what the cost is. We did full cost analysis when we did expansion phase 2 for the no smoking areas. And what we did is what I'm asking for here. What is the new signage required to adequately identify the no smoking and the designated smoking areas? And I noted that because at the last round, we did over 180 signs, and every one of those signs had to have a post of some kind or be attached to an existing, and there was substantial cost to implementing. There's a cost factor is what I'm trying to get across. Number 2, what's the inventory needed for the new smoking butt tenders and where are they gonna go? Because they're gonna be required at the entrances to each no smoking area. How many and what's the cost? What are the costs for providing at least one, if not 2 pavilions? Okay, maybe that's an extra for later or something, but I'm suggesting that from the get-go, we determine to do it, put the pavilions there and then fund them. So anyhow, I said, these are the questions I will be asking, and so that's what I'm doing. Again, for me, the funding is fundamental in being able to improve this, because the funding and knowing that we can get the signs and the ash urns and we've got all our logistics thought through clearly relates to the effective date that this goes into effect. Is it going to be, you know, if we vote today, is it going to go into effect today? Is it going to go into effect for next summer? And I don't think we've done our homework yet, but I hope we do, because I intend to support it at that time if some of these things gel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any,
Are these pictures, maybe I just read this or missed it, but the pictures that Stan just put up, they're not actually are they referenced in the ordinance here at all, or?
No, Commissioner, the ordinance says that the city
Yes.
manager can designate
Can
areas,
designate.
those areas that she would like to designate.
Okay, all right. But there's flexibility in this that doesn't necessarily, these are not going to be part of it. She can
That's right.
determine, take Commissioner Mills' feedback and rethink it, or whatever the case may be. And I'd just like to hear on the cost side of it, from the city manager, is this a big cost? We have sign printing capabilities in the city. Do we have those capabilities in the city? And is this a big expense, or is it just a continuation of what we're already doing with the no smoking ban?
For the additional areas, or for the construction of a new pavilion?
No, for the areas that Stan said that he'd like to see the costs associated with these changes, particularly related to the signs.
Well, there's cost, obviously, for signage and, some labor that the city staff would provide, but speaking of costs, these particular areas outside of the convention center, adjacent to the front doors, if you will, were chosen because there is an overhang there, and there would not be any costs associated with construction of a pavilion or an overhang or something else like that. So that was just a suggestion.
Do you think do you have any idea what the cost would be for these signs? Is it a significant cost? Is it something just based on your experience that we probably, you have the flexibility in the budget to put these signs in place and to fund them? What's your
Yes.
take on it?
Yes. I think it would be,
Hey, I'm
less-
sorry, I'm
just
sorry, but I
curious.
don't know how we can do this. The last program, we had a map of the entire city with 180 some signs located on them. And we knew each size sign because there were signs this big, this big, this big, and this big. And we had them all mapped out, and we knew exactly what the cost would be by then. These signs are not, if we go, and I hope we go with signs that match the existing ones. They're kind of decorative
course.
color, no smoking type of signs. And if we go with that, they have to be made by an outside firm. The city don't have the capability of doing that.
Okay.
So that's an expense there. I would disagree with just trying to guess and say, yes, we can fund this thing, because who knows if this council wants to put that money into it in a month or 2 months versus 8 months from now, because maybe there's other projects that we have money and funding that we want to
I
more
think it's
immediately
fair to
get.
ask what the magnitude of the funding might be as we consider this. So,
But I think we have
So-
to decide whether or not the idea of a pavilion is something that the commissioners want to entertain, because that's definitely something that's going to cost. So, that's
Definitely.
part of it.
a pavilion.
we didn't put any pavilion on the beach
No.
for,
Right.
no, for smoking.
Well, I bring it up because Commissioner Mills has brought it up,
No, no.
so.
And the way I look at it in signs, the only signage we really need is around the campus here, which I don't know if we need more than a half a dozen signs. And we could have the exact same, small signs like that with the same logo that we've had in the past. And,
And there would
I
be a
think-
few needed along the canal, but
if you-
again,
so if there's a dozen.
probably three
completely, I'd be
signs or-
surprised.
In terms of a pavilion, yes, wouldn't that be nice in the ideal world? I'd have great difficulty defending that against taxpayers in this town to build a pavilion for smokers only. It'd be a lot different if we're talking about building a pavilion in a park that could be used by all families and visitors and residents and et cetera.
I'm not clear why we even have to have I mean, honestly, I don't, do we have an obligation or, do we have an obligation to have designated smoking areas on the municipal complex? I have actually seen other cities that have said there's just no smoking on, period, and there's no designated smoking areas in the, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, I'm just wondering if Dick or Sharon, that this is something we considered and just decided the reasonable thing to do is to have designated smoking areas, or if we considered having no designated smoking area at all? I'm just curious.
I would just, when this was first brought to my attention, and actually when the building was under construction, Commissioner Mills and I talked about it, and Commissioner Mills actually did some preliminary work on this. And I always think, and, take the road of fairness, and we do have smokers as employees here, and to be fair, it's not, me to judge, whether or not I think that's right or wrong, but to be fair, I think that the city should provide a smoking area, if you will. And then we have, visitors here and others, and maybe you've already seen employees smoking when you come in or you go out of the building. So there's nothing wrong with that. This would just designate a specific area if we're including a non-smoking campus.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the fairness attitude toward the employees that smoke, that we have to, and then certainly the people that attend the convention center and the events that take place there. If we don't have it designated, then I'm not sure what people will do. Then we're going to have people really violating the ban that we're putting here, and then that causes a lot more problems. Or we're sending people so far away that it's unreasonable for them to go out in the street or one direction or another. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, I was just curious what the
But,
thinking was.
you know,
Thanks.
maybe down the line with the city has a will and a way to want to take a look at no smoking in all public areas, then I think that's another discussion for another day, another year or something.
I guess I'm kind of curious now that it's been brought up. For the convention center, which we obviously have lots of different guests and different events, what have people been doing since they have come back to the convention center?
Going right outside the door.
Just going outside the door and
Licking
who
their
knows what
cigarettes.
Licking
happens?
their cigarettes in the
Yeah, okay.
And the cigarettes,
Okay.
yeah, the cigarettes end up in the parking lot, and then they get
Yeah.
washed into the storm.
Yeah, because
With the stormwater and.
I mean, what occurs to me is in order to, I mean, to me, you can make things as simple or as complicated as you want to. So in the short term, to me, making it as simple as possible seems to be what's on the table. And then maybe a longer and a different discussion about amenities if if that need seems to continue to bubble up to the point of the taxpayer funding and so forth. So,
Yeah, I'm almost of the feeling that these two areas that have been picked out seem fine because it's close to the entrance, but one of them's far away from the entrance. Let's see how it goes. It affords the opportunity for any on the staff that may want to smoke to be able to go away from the building, away from the entrance. It's covered. And my feeling is that it's the only expense here would be at this time would be having maybe a dozen signs, put a couple up in the park over by Canal Street, and half a dozen or so around the campus in conspicuous places. Small signs, not much bigger than this, and with the same logo, same statements on it that we have now.
What occurs to me is the staff smokers are different from the visitor smokers, and perhaps an area for the staff smokers doesn't necessarily have to be outside the convention center. I don't know where it necessarily should be, but is there another area that might make sense for staff to go besides going out in the parking lot right there at the entrance of the convention center?
Well, currently, and again, not designated, but the area is outside of the employee entrance on the west side of the building and the employee parking lot. Again, non-designated area. And
But perhaps we want to designate that for staff then. So, because right now we're telling them, I think, with this ordinance, that they can no longer smoke at that undesignated area.
correct.
Yeah.
So it would be a designated area, which are these two spots. So, I mean, that has been there for, the almost 2 years that we've been in the building. The other spot is the, inside the storage area, the overhead garage for the convention center on the west side of the building of the convention center, the loading dock door.
Well, just trying to address what Commissioner Mills is saying then in terms of the main entryways to, City Hall and the convention center, that if we did designate those areas for staff, in addition to maybe these two areas, which would be used by visitors, that might make some sense, so we're not driving the staff out to the convention area and it's the front parking lot to smoke. So I'm suggesting, I guess, to be clear, it's the additional designation for 3 for where they currently are going. Because that seems,
Right, because it'd be the entrance to the city employee entrance on the west side of the building, and then where the overhang is. So it's
then you're
4
not
areas.
really having people pass through
Yeah.
there other than employees and so.
I think that makes sense. So there's 2 different areas. It's the visitor area, and then it's the staff area. I like that.
I have no issue with that. I mean, the area where, as I just stated, I have not heard any complaints. I don't know if people have complaints, but they've certainly not come my way on the area currently now. I mean, everybody knows who's a smoker and who isn't. And again, I haven't heard any negative feedback that they're passing through that entranceway, and it's offensive to them. Now, again, I don't know that, but and I've also seen employees walking around the building just taking a walk and smoking. So whether that's good for them, that's certainly up to them. So, but this came from the 2 new areas outside the east side on the convention center came from, frankly, just the non-smoking campus, and where can we provide that? And at the same time, do we want our visitors at the convention center, yes or no, to have the ability to smoke? If that's if that's no, maybe you want to consider just the employee side on the west side of the building.
No, it sounds to me like there's consensus that there should be a designated area for visitors as well, is what I'm hearing.
Well, to me, visitors are going to smoke one way or the other.
Yeah,
so
so let's designate it.
We gain from
Sure.
having somewhere for them to put their cigarette butt.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I think that makes sense. I'm good with that. So it sounds like that generally we're okay with the 2 areas that you designated on these pictures. I mean, not okay, I'm not saying that. So it sounds like where this discussion has led is that there'd be 2 designated spaces as per these pictures. And then you would also officially designate the area outside the employee entrance and at the overhang, area, correct?
Yes.
Is that right?
4 rather than
4.
2.
Right, it's 2 for staff, 2 for visitors, is basically, I think what you're saying, Pat, right? Okay.
Well, and that makes sense to me
Does too.
because if your staff wants to honestly have a moment of peace while they smoke a cigarette, putting them in the area where it's a public entrance might not accomplish that. So just purchasing a couple of more, a couple more containers to put their cigarette butts on the west side makes sense to me.
Well, again, we contemplated designated smoking area opposite Bad Hair Day for the public, generally the public or the employees, and the one on the west side just for employees. Pavilion doesn't have to be this $10,000 thing like on the boardwalk. It could be a wood umbrella that's got a 10-foot diameter. I mean, you do all kinds of different things. But again, I'm not agreeing with either of these spot locations. What I do agree with is the type of language that we use to designate smoking areas on the beach. And again, that is primarily that they're marked by appropriate signage in the cigarette butt containers, and no area is located closer than 40 feet or pick a dimension from an entranceway.
Well,
So what I'm saying, I'm not saying have two designated, 4 designated, 3 designated. Leave that to the discretion of the city manager. However, put these conditions in so that they can't be
well,
close.
I mean, I think you're in the minority at the moment from the consensus perspective, because I think most of us just agreed that, the 2 designated areas that the city manager has picked out on the east side, and then the 2 that are suggested on the west side, 3 of them are within 40 or 50 feet. One of them, I think, maybe as much as 40 feet, but 3 of them are within that, and so it wouldn't work from your perspective. Asking our people that come into the convention center and pay and go to events that, have time limitations, to ask them to walk across the parking lot to some pavilion over in the corner seems a little bit out of the way. So, my feeling is if the majority here is in favor of the 4, we should just move forward. And, obviously, we're going to need, you're going to have to figure out the expense of 4 of those containers. I guess you got a couple already, and the signage. But again, the signage, if it's a dozen signs, I think that's covers it in all spaces. And I don't see that as being a monster expense.
Well, and there'll need to be the butt tender containers
Yeah.
along the Canal Park, a couple there, and then, of course, that also involves the labor of emptying those out at whatever periodic time that happens. But we have folks going along there already doing
Yeah, and maybe we can
kinds
ask
of,
the city
cleanup
manager to
and,
get us the numbers on the signage, on the containers, the number what we need, and whatever numbers you think. We can go ahead with the ordinance, because it really doesn't say on the ordinance where the canisters are going to be placed or where the signs are going to be placed, and we can move forward. One thing to what you said, Commissioner Mills, where you said on 224-2A, Grove Park, and then just cross out the language that Glenn put in. I would suggest keeping the language that Glenn just put in, because there is no dock or stairway down at the moment, and we all know it's connected to Grove Park, but somebody new going there may not think the same. So I would suggest, it doesn't hurt to keep the language in there.
that was my thought when I suggested it, that while it may be a little redundant, like Commissioner Mills pointed out, we haven't had Grove Park Canal access area in the past, and now that it's on its way and moving ahead, I think it's important to designate it.
So unless there's anything further to discuss on this, if I can get a motion in a second?
So just to be clear, the city manager will come back at the August workshop with some dollar amounts for us, just for information, or just send it to us, or how do you want to handle that?
I think for information, but I mean, at that point in time, you can figure out how many signage you think we need, how many containers you think we need.
Certainly.
Okay.
Happy to report on that.
Okay, so you ready for a motion? I move approval.
Before you do that,
Oh, excuse
do you
me.
want to talk for a moment, though, about the implement? I think Commissioner Mills raised
The
the idea of when it's
implementation
going to be
date.
implemented, and if we don't have the signage and everything yet, I don't know if it should become effective. Currently, the ordinance says it becomes effective immediately upon its adoption.
And what are
So,
you suggesting?
I mean, Sharon, what do you think is an appropriate time for you to be able to get things together and.
Well, I'll have it for the August 5th workshop, and if the commissioners approve of that, well, signs to be erected probably September 30th.
Well, rather than a date, can you just put upon installation of appropriate signage and
Yes.
cigarette bin
Yep.
butt disposal thing?
I think that's right.
So, do you, I don't think that we should need to approve the cost for this. I mean, we have to move forward with it. We're agreeing to move forward with it, so,
Just having.
so it's just informational. Okay, good, because I mean, it's gonna cost what it costs, and we need to have it, and so, there you go.
September 30th or
Yeah,
October 1st, something like that.
That's fine.
But I think the point was about the, having the actual, the disposal containers and the signage is the thing, not the,
Not the costs.
Yeah.
So where, how many and where or something?
So you're
Okay.
saying two different things, just Commissioner Mills' recommendation was that the effective time frame be when the signs are and
the receptacles
you
are
said something
available.
different, Mayor, I just want to make sure.
30th, October 1st, whenever.
Well, I don't think we're putting a date, right? I just want to clarify that.
I think I'll just read something along the lines of, the ordinance shall become effective immediately upon the installation of signage and cigarette disposal containers. And I'll leave it a period there, and then I think the city manager, once that happens, she can report to you all once that's,
That's right.
once that's happened. So you all know it's in effect.
Good.
Okay,
I
very
think
good.
it's good.
Well, the chief isn't here, but I'll say to the city manager, I would hope and expect that we need to have some kind of education program, number one, and number two, that there's some leniency in violating people that smoke in the wrong areas, because if you recall, for phase one and phase two, there was a good amount of leniency, and it was an education program, and our seasonals, for instance, went up to people and said, did you know there's a new ordinance? So I expect that, but I felt obligated to speak up. Thank you.
I would think that would happen. All right, it's up to you.
I move approval of an ordinance to amend Chapter 224, smoking, outdoor, in parentheses, of the Municipal Code of the City of Rehoboth Beach by amending sections 224-2 and 224-4 relating to areas where smoking is prohibited and violations and penalties.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve an ordinance to amend Chapter 224, smoking outdoor of the Municipal Code of City of Rehoboth Beach by amending sections 224-2 and 224-4 relating to areas where smoking is prohibited and violations and penalties. Before we actually take the vote, is there anything from the public? Okay, if not,
Discussion.
discussion from
Yeah,
here.
thank you. I'm going to vote no. Surprisingly, I support the concept of this, but not surprisingly to you, I'm voting no as a protest against the lightning speed with which this was brought in front of us. It used to be that we would provide the actual written ordinance at a workshop meeting, or at least a meeting or two before coming to a vote, and that was not done. And what seems to be more of a practice with this administration. So, again, I protest that there's minimum opportunity for the public to have read this and react to it. I also protest what I call the lack of planning. Getting the pricing and inventory and how much after the fact doesn't fly for me. And it's disappointing that this council would act that way. I want to know ahead of time how much, what's needed and what the funding is. There's no costing model. We don't know anything about this stuff. And also, there's no conditions on the placement of the designated smoking areas, as I mentioned. So, just by way of explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, Commissioner Sharp,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser,
Aye.
Commissioner Mills,
No.
Commissioner Cluzzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrne,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks to all of you.
Did that motion include edit to the
Yes.
east side of the canal bank?
The east side, changing
also
how
the
to haul
effective
and the effective date.
Very good.
All right. The next is new business, which is consideration and vote on a resolution setting a public hearing on an ordinance to amend Chapter 270 zoning of the municipal code relating to the location, placement, construction, maintenance of tower-based wireless communication facilities, non-tower wireless communication facilities, and small wireless communication facilities and regulations related thereto. This is what we spoke about in our last workshop meeting, which this has been going on for an extended period of time. City Solicitor.
So the ordinance has been prepared. It's gone through several iterations. We've spoken at length with the Cohen Law Group, who the city has retained to prepare this ordinance. They are kind of the experts in this industry. They're based out of Pittsburgh, and as you know, they were on the line last time you had your workshop meeting, available to ask questions. So again, this is being placed in the zoning ordinance. That's why it requires a public hearing. And the only thing you'd be adopting today is a resolution that would establish a date for that public hearing. You're not adopting the ordinance itself.
And the public hearing's got to be 30 days from,
And we'll need about 30 days to
is
to
it
public.
about?
It's a 15-day notice of publication requirement, but it usually takes about 30 days to get everything in, so we have the 15 days.
The only reason I'm asking is today's the 19th, and our next voting meeting is the 16th of August, so it's.
That's adequate.
That should be
Yep.
enough, okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right.
What is it, 16th
Of August.
I have a question, though. We had this presentation made to us, and there were questions and comments and suggestions from the commission. I don't know if any of those were entertained by the vendor or where that stands. Was there anything else that came out of that? Or,
Has there been another iteration, Sharon? Do you know? I mean, I don't have my whole file here. I have to go back and see
Yeah.
specifically what you all raised to see if
There's
any-
not another iteration, but Mr. Cohen was on the line and heard all of the comments, so I assume it just hasn't been done yet, but there will be a final version.
well, that's what that's
Incorporating
my
the
question.
comments.
There'll be a
Well, you're right. I
version
mean, there
that may or may not incorporate our comments. Or
That's right.
what-
And there needs to be a final version that's available to the public to inspect for the public hearing. So we'll follow up with that and make sure that to the extent there is another version, we get it and get it distributed and available to the public.
Okay, thank
Maybe
you.
we can get it out by the next workshop,
Right.
so that we can
Okay.
discuss it a
Yep.
little bit at that time. That'd be great. Okay, any further discussion on that before we get a motion to set a public hearing? If not, if someone can provide a motion in a second.
I move to adopt the resolution before us, setting a date of 16th of August at 3 p.m. In this room.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve a resolution by the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach proposing that a public hearing be held on the subject of amending the Rehoboth Beach Municipal Code, Chapter 270, Sections 270-4, and inserting a new section, 270-46.1.2, relating to the location, placement, construction, and maintenance of tower-based wireless communications of facilities, non-tower wireless communication facilities, and small wireless communication facilities, and the regulation of such facilities. Any further discussion before I take the vote? Any input from the public? If not, go down. Commissioner Schlosser.
Aye.
Commissioner Mills.
Aye.
Commissioner Cluzy.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Aye.
Commissioner Byrne.
Aye.
Commissioner Sharp.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. That passes, and that'll be set for the 16th for our regular meeting, and getting out documents before that. Let's see, the next citizen comments, I don't have any from anybody else?
I have something. I want to respond to several residents who in the last couple of weeks have expressed to me kind of a concern and kind of a mild worry that that our city isn't as busy as it is some summers and have asked me if there's something specific going on. And so I was very pleased to hear from the city manager that we're on target in terms of parking revenue and that we were up 35% in terms of parking revenue in June. And so I think that's a partial, very positive answer to those folks. And then Carol Everhart from the Chamber was not able to be here today because of a family wedding this weekend, but I did talk with her recently, and she gave me some data in terms of hotel rooms, because that's another indicator of how our community is doing this season. And I looked at both the zip code, and it's just a little behind where it was a year ago in terms of occupancy of hotel rooms. And she thinks, Carol thinks, that difference may be due to the increase of private internet rentals that has increased multifold in recent time. But if we look at just the 1,087 hotel rooms that they monitor right in the city of Rehoboth Beach, and not to bore you, but just over the past 5 weeks, the percent of occupancy from the middle of June, June 14th, until almost today has been 90%, and this is by the week, 95%, 92%, 98% last week, and 93% in this current week. And we're very much on target in terms of occupancy as another indicator. And so the reason I'm saying this publicly is I'm wanting to respond to those several people that have expressed this kind of worry and concern that something is going on that isn't as positive as it has been in more recent years. Of course, there are other indicators and other ways to measure this, but these are the very obvious ways.
Yeah, thank you. I've spoken to a number of, I spoke to the mayor of Dewey today, actually, and he said things are very busy there, but rentals are down a little bit. You know, he says their hotels are up in that 90, 95 plus occupancy rate. And I think if you're at 90, 90 plus, I think that's extremely good. I mean, I look at this, I had a conversation with Dennis Forney from the Cape Gazette yesterday about all this stuff, and it just seems, from my perspective, I don't remember how many sunny weekends in a row like we've had this year. You know, I mean, Memorial Day was a very positive weather weekend, and the forecast was good. It's usually one way or the other. The forecast is bad and the weather's good, and vice versa. I think the number of people in town are more than we've had in the last 5 years, just the crowds of people. Now, if you look at July 4th, I think we had less people for the fireworks than we typically do, but it was on Wednesday. But I think if you look at that whole week, I think that whole week was very crowded because you had 2 sets of fireworks, really, 3rd and the 4th. You know, I've been out on the bicycle trail going around the loop, and I swear there's easily twice as many people on the bicycle trail this summer than there were last summer. And you all go out on the highway. It's, I mean, I think that tells you right there too. But I mean, there's a tremendous amount of people turning off Route 1 into Rehoboth Avenue, going down Rehoboth Avenue Extended, and it's just continuous traffic. And I've seen more traffic earlier when I've been over by the Circle at the museum. More traffic earlier in the day going out of town. So like a traffic jam at the Circle starting around 3 o'clock going out, and it lasting longer till 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening on Saturdays and some other days too. So I think it's very busy this summer. I think, you know, business is always hard because there's a lot of people to have to feed, if you will. And there are a lot of businesses out on the highway as well as the city, but I think business is, it's crowded.
And I would like to offer in the volunteer fire department report, if you look back at April, May, and June, where all these numbers are summarized for us, they're all trending up every single month. And in this month's report, it draws out, crowds on weekends are very overwhelming. So if you need some ammunition, when you talk to people, I think a good indicator is what our first responders are seeing.
Yeah, no question. And I know I mentioned on the meters before, and we have like consistent information through June 30th. And the meters, I mentioned they were up 35%. I think last year at the end of June, we were at about $750,000 in meters, and it's about $1.05 million. You know, I mean, it's very, very large. Now, a lot of that's $1 on Rehoboth Avenue and so on and so forth. But, and then I checked with Jackie on the permits through June, and theirs is a little different. It's more, less digitized, but through June, they were up probably, I'd say, 8 or 9% from last year on the permits. And that's just through June. Any other commissioner comments? If not, our next meeting is the 5th of August, and then we have one the 16th. As Sharon mentioned before, there is a Planning Commission meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock here to discuss sea level rise, things of that nature. And then there's another one on the 3rd, the next Saturday, to talk about mixed use in the commercial district downtown. And then, as everybody recalls, on the 10th is the election here at City Hall. And for the commissioners, next Friday, there is just a brief special meeting, a voting meeting to approve the appointment of the Board of Elections, which we have to do 2 weeks ahead of time, and that's why we had to schedule it. That was my mistake, not scheduling, putting that on there. Election officials, excuse me, yes. And those you should have based on the email I sent out. If there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, citizen comment.
I apologize, please.
Good afternoon, Walter Birmingham, 123 Hamilton
The
Avenue.
meeting unadjourned.
Unadjourned.
Is that a word?
Sorry, Ann.
At the Henlopen, at the Mariners Park, that's the triangle in center. It's busier than ever, and that's good. It's good for the business people, it's good for the visitors. But it's getting very exasperating. We have so many more people on bicycles. And they're coming off of Surf Avenue, and they're coming down through the little triangle where it can come out and go to 2 different people. It is very well marked. Do not enter. We have a shortage of policemen, although most people don't believe that. We have basically a shift commander and 2 officers on a shift. We need a certified police officer down there capable of giving tickets. We have people in cars, they don't give a damn. They come in the street the wrong way. We have bicycles come in against the do not enter signs. The people on the oceanfront, when they back out, they're looking to their back and to the right. They're not expecting people to be coming in the other end. And we need some enforcement down there. And you know, we're not gonna get it now, but we've cut back and we need the budget expanded. If you want all the business and all the people here to feed the meters, you need some people that are authorized to go down there and stand out in the street and say, stop, turn around, go down the end of the street and come back in like regular people, or do something up on the sidewalk and let the people come in. Little background, we're talking about signs earlier. There are no signs out that I've seen that says pull in forward. And there needs to be some plans on how that goes unless I've missed those signs. Back to the days of Mayor Cooper, we still have no signs that says no bikes on sidewalks unless I've missed them. If I have, please tell me where. And we need no bikes on the sidewalks. There's too many bikes out there. At night, so many people have no lights on their bike. Walk it. If you had no lights on your car, you'd be told to pull over, park it, or do something else, or get it towed. It needs to be enforced. State Road, Rehoboth Avenue, they go down the street. Nobody stops them. You don't have bicycle people out there stop them like you used to. They need to be stopped, tie wrap the wheel so it won't turn, make them pick it up and carry it. But you wouldn't want to have a bicycle run into you or you run into a bike. They're going to have your car towed. And it's just ridiculous. And these aren't budget issues or public safety. They need to be solved.
Thank you. I'd like to comment. The area at the Henlopen, north of the Henlopen, is called Surf Place, and it goes around the corner of the lake there. has been a problem, and it's a challenge dealing with vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, and bicycles all up in that area. And the Streets and Transportation Committee has been actively looking at options for getting bicycles on and off the north end of the boardwalk, because they asked us to look at it. The Boardwalk and Beach Committee is also looking at it from, we've got different perspective, different ideas. And you'll probably be getting a report from the Boardwalk and Beach Committee maybe in August. And I understand the Street and Transportation Committee is on hiatus until maybe September. So anyhow, I expect at some point you'll be getting 2 reports. And then maybe that's the appropriate time to start looking at how to handle traffic and the problems up in that situation, area. Thank you.
Thank you. Did someone else have any comments? I thought someone else would stood up. Okay. I think I'm okay. This meeting's adjourned.